All right, how you guys doing? It's been a while, probably I would say 5 years since I did a video. But I've been busy. I've been doing other things, and so making videos had to wait. Um, I felt compelled to make a video on this topic because I feel like Black culture is under attack, and a great defender of Black people, and I feel like, hey, let me add my 2 cents to this whole controversy uh, about whether Puerto Ricans are Black and whether hip hop is 50-50, Puerto Ricans and Black. So I'm going to deal with two areas in terms of the purpose of this video. I'm hoping the information that I provide can give you some insight and some of the things and tools you can use to combat the false narrative that all Puerto Ricans are Black or all Puerto Ricans are African. That's the narrative you hear a lot from people like Fat Joe, who will suggest that because of their African ancestry, that somehow they have a right to call themselves Black. And, being Black is not only having African ancestry, but it's also about a lived experience, how you're treated, how society sees you, how you see yourself in society. So you just can't go around calling yourself Black when in fact you aren't. So purpose of this video is we're going to deal with the realities of what it means to be Black or not. And for the record, I'm of the opinion that all Puerto Ricans are not Black. Now, we all know that Puerto Ricans are made up primarily of three groups. You have European, Indigenous, and African, right? So out of the 5 leading ancestral DNA companies, along with articles written from the National Geographic, they have determined that the average amount of African ancestry in Puerto Ricans is about 20%. That's basically a low number in contrast to FBA's, which hovers around 70 to 80%. So even on that biological level or that genetic level, there is no comparison. So now I've heard people say, oh, you can't trust those DNA companies. There's always false positives. And I agree. But if the tests are administered correctly, you will get a pretty accurate assessment of the data, right? So let me show you in contrast. And I just mentioned this. African Americans have 20% European ancestry, right? But you don't see us going around calling ourselves white. You know why? Because no one would believe it. We would be laughed at. But somehow we accept this notion that Puerto Ricans can call themselves Black, especially the white Puerto Ricans. All they got to do is say I'm Black, and we Black people like dummies will say, okay. All you're doing when you do that, you open the door for them to get into your stuff and steal it or take advantage of you. That's what's going to happen. Black people have to stop trying to find allies. And this all came about. Listen, I understand how this all came about. In the 1900s, I think it was a Virginia law that they adopted this notion of the one drop rule, right? Anybody with one drop of African blood is considered Black or African. Well, they didn't use the word Black back in those days. They just said Negro, Negroid, or Negro, right? And so people like Fat Joe take advantage of that. He knows we want allies. Black people in this country have been terrorized almost over 400 years, 500 years in this country. Of course, we want people to align with us and help us fight our battles. You know what I'm saying? And so if someone want to identify with us, we kind of open our arms and say, yes, come on in. But we can't let everybody in. And we got to be practical and sensible about who we allow to be Black. Now, there's this genetic, in this early, I think it was in the 18th century, these white European anthropologists came up with this notion of the three races. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick. The three races. Let me see. Like I said, I don't do this always, so forgive me if I'm a little slow with this, but let's see if it comes up. Okay, it looks like it's going to come up. All right, okay. All right. Okay, so you have the three races. You have the Negroid race, you have the Caucasoid, and the Mongoloid race. And what they determined out of these three groups, there are physical characteristics that are different amongst those groups, different phenotypes that particular groups have. And so with African or Negroid people, they say that they are the people from the West and Central Africa, but they exclude the North for political reasons. We understand white supremacy. They exclude the North because Egypt is located there. But we all know that that was also African, Negroid as well. But for the purpose of this discussion, they're talking about the West and the central part of Africa. And so what they say, Negroid phenotypes, you have the woolly to frizzled hair, short, tight curled hair, dark pigmentation, what do you call it? They even said big teeth. I don't know about that. But then they talk about the wide nose and the full lips. And then prognatism. All characteristics of Black stereotypical phenotypes, because we all know that all Africans don't look like that and all Africans don't have those phenotypes, but the majority of West and Central Africans and South Africans do in fact have those phenotypes. And so as Black people conditioned in the way we are in this country, those are the things we look for to identify Black people, right? So you can't tell me if I see a person with those phenotypes, I'm not going to associate that person with being a Black person or a person of African descent. So if I see a Caucasian person, I see certain characteristics that tell me that person is probably from Europe. The same thing with an Asian person. I see certain, if I see the I don't want to say the wrong word, but in terms of what they actually call the slanty eyes, I know that sounds disrespectful, but you know what I'm saying. If you see an Asian person, you're going to associate those features with Asian people, and they probably from Asia. So this is how we identify each other from the way these anthropologists have decided to characterize us, right? And under their theory, like I said, they call us Negroid. And so that's how we see us. But now today, they want us to avoid all of that, and anybody can be Black. Even white Puerto Ricans like Fat Joe can be Black. You know, so we got to put an end to that, because we're not dumb. We know what a Black person looks like. You know, we're not dumb. So what they often do, they'll point to the fact that they have, in certain parts of Puerto Rico, they still practice some African customs. And so they'll bring up a town called, if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, somebody could correct me. Loaiza, Puerto Rico. I guess it's a town, but here's an article from the New York Times in 2020. Why some Black Puerto Ricans claim white on the census. Okay, so even some Black Puerto Ricans have a problem claiming white, right? I'm claiming Black. I'm sorry. So I'll read a portion of this article. Okay. A dozen dancers wearing bright, colorful ankle length skirts gathered around 5 wooden drums. Their shoulders and hips pulse with the percussions and an upbeat African-inspired rhythm. And then it go on to say, Loaiza is a township founded by formerly enslaved Africans. It is one of the many places in Puerto Rico where African-inspired traditions like the Bamba dance workshop is practiced. Okay? But that doesn't mean all the people who live there would necessarily call themselves black. Okay. More than 3/4 of Puerto Ricans identify as white on the last census, even though much of the population on the island has roots in Africa. The number is down from 80 to 20% to 20 years ago. It's down 80% 20 years ago. But activists and demographers say it's still inaccurate, and they are working to get more Puerto Ricans of African descent to identify as black on the next census in an effort to draw attention to the island's racial disparities. Okay. Now, that number, now in the 2020 census, the number of people claiming white dropped. I think they got a wake-up call from Maria. So here's a part that deals with that. After Hurricane Maria, Mary Cruz Rivera Clemente, the founder of Corporacion Pioneers, if I'm saying that wrong, say Entrega, said it took longer for electricity to be restored to Loaiza than in the capital of San Juan. Okay, so they talk about racial discrimination, or what they feel was racial discrimination. Okay, let me see. Okay. There are people that don't want to use the word black because they think it is an insult. And there is still that idea that we need to better the race. Mejora la raza, a popular saying in Latin American countries that suggests that light skin is more desirable than dark skin. Many Puerto Ricans say they also feel that choosing black erases their unique cultural identity, including language, food, customs, and align their experience too closely. And it aligns their experience too closely with that of African Americans on the mainland. So they don't want to be called black because they don't want you to associate them with black people. You hear what I'm saying? They don't want to associate themselves with black people. They want to be separate. They want to be seen separate from African Americans. So they will not choose black. But Fat Joe says Puerto Ricans are black. But the majority of them don't think that way. Genetically, they're not that way. And in their spirit, they're not that way. It doesn't matter if you practice African customs. That does not make you black. There's many African Americans that practice Roman, who are Roman Catholics, right? You got popes, cardinals that are from Africa. That don't make them Italians. So this whole notion, because you have customs that are African still in Puerto Rico that you acknowledge, that in itself does not qualify you to be black. So we have to be real about this whole nonsense about being black. Now, Fat Joe, on one hand, he contradicts himself. You know what I'm saying? Let me see if I can find, let me go here. I want to talk about this DNA, and I'm hoping that it'll come up because I've been having problems with this. Okay, good. It's going to come up. Okay. All right. Okay. Hopefully you can see this, right? Isn't it amazing? You always hear a lot of Puerto Ricans say, well, my grandmother, or my abuelo was black, or my abuela was black, my abuelo was black, my grandfather or my grandmother was black. Therefore, I'm black, right? But keep in mind, according to this chart, if you're the grandmother, let's put it over here. I'm going to put my pointer. If you can see here, you have your grandfather and your grandmother. Those two only equals 25% of you. Now, we all know that 9 times out of 10, there is no full-blooded African in Puerto Rico. So that 25% that you receive from your grandmother is diluted African ancestry. All right? It's not as much as you think. And I already proven, and you can look it up yourself, that The majority of Puerto Ricans have very little African ancestry. The majority. You got to keep that in mind. And if you want to look up the information yourself, you can find the information and see that I'm not lying about that. All right. So we can't continue to go with this narrative that Puerto Ricans are black. All right. So let me move on. All right. Let me move on. Now, this whole thing about Fat Joe making this 50-50 comment, he basically can contradict himself. On one hand, he says that Puerto Ricans are black or African, right? But then when he talks about hip hop, he says that it was created by blacks and Puerto Ricans. So no longer Puerto Ricans are black. He separates Puerto Ricans from black. So if you did the math, right, and then you got the Jamaicans saying that they created hip hop and they consider Jamaicans black, then Puerto Ricans have contributed 50%, and the blacks and Jamaicans have to split their 50% amongst each other, according to Fat Joe. Despite the fact that everything about hip hop is FBA, everything. All the elements of hip hop is FBA. Nothing about hip hop suggests any Latin influence, any Puerto Rican influence, any Jamaican influence, no other culture you can identify in hip hop music. At least in the early creations of the music. I'm sure years later there are those influences, but not in the beginning. All right? So I think Puerto Ricans get confused when they tout the fact that Puerto Ricans were there. They argue it as if it was a cultural influence. But you were just there. You were just hanging out with black folks. It was proximity to black folks that you got to witness this thing. You see what I'm saying? So you cannot. Here's the thing. When black music, there's a long history of what black people have done in this country in terms of creativity. All the music that we created in this country, I would almost say every 10 to 15 years, black people have created a new form of music. We're the most creative people on the planet. In every arena, we're the most creative. And there's a jealousy there. And I'm not going to dwell too much on the jealousy. But there's a jealousy there. This is why this grab for hip hop, because they said, "Damn, and we ain't gonna give that to the blacks people, give it to the black people as well. Come on, we got to have something." So they're trying to take it from black people. Everything from the vernacular to the fashion to the music, all says black culture. Now, Fat Joe, let me tell you what. Let me see if this will come up. Okay, let me see. Pull this right. I want Fat Joe. Let me see if it'll come up. Hopefully it will, but it doesn't look like it. I don't know. Sometimes these things don't work. But anyway, let me tell you what 50-50 looks like. And it won't come up, so I can't get it up. So 50-50 looks like. Latin jazz is an example of 50-50, right? Because you had Afro-Cubans collaborating with African-American musicians that created Latin jazz. Now, there's an article I wanted to read a little bit of it, but it won't come up. But the essence of the article basically speaks to how these two cultures collaborated and created this music called Latin jazz, the kind of music that Tito Puente is known for and other Latin artists. That is 50-50, Joe. That's 50-50. Hip hop is 100% FBA, 100%. So be clear on what 50-50 actually means. All right. So let me see. So in terms of this whole thing about, and it's almost like appropriating to a certain degree, right? it's almost like appropriating. We can't allow people to appropriate our culture and not call them on it. We cannot allow that. So like, for example, when Bruno Mars, switched over and became this hot R&B star, right? People accuse him of appropriating, right? And to some degree, I can understand why people would say that. But what I appreciate about Bruno Mars, at least he acknowledged the black people for creating the music that he now enjoys to say. He feels privileged to do it, right? Now, we are so willing to accept people that are not us. We even said that, I heard a woman said that Bruno Mars is black. And you know why she said that he was black? Because his father was Puerto Rican. Think about that. Now, I seen a picture. I seen his father. His father's a white Puerto Rican, right? He probably don't have no more than maybe 12% African ancestry. That means Bruno Mars, at best, might have 5%. At best. How in the world is he African? How in the hell is he black? But this is how, how our minds have been so screwed up that if anybody claimed to be black, we're willing to accept them. Just like this gentleman right here. Anybody from New York know who this is? This is Adam Clayton Powell. I'm gonna briefly talk about him, right? Now, he was a congressperson and a preacher in Harlem. And he referred to himself as an African American. Now, if you look at him, there's no way you would look at him and think he's African American. But he claimed to be African American. Now, a little bit about his history when he was growing up, right? He didn't even know who he was. Both of his parents were mulattoes. His father, if you saw a picture of his father, you would think he was a white man. So we don't even know how much African ancestry he has, right? His mother was a mulatto who had Native American ancestry as well. So it is likely that Powell probably only had about maybe 10% at best African ancestry. Look at his hair. Look at his nose. Look at his lips. Look at his skin. That doesn't say black to me. But again, black people want allies. So we say, come on in. But to his credit, he represented black people well. I've heard things about him that, I can't say anything negative about Powell. He looked after his people, or what he perceived as his adopted people. I would say his adopted people, right? Okay, so I think I dealt with that. Let me move on. I want to move on to, there's this brother, Puerto Rican brother. He started making videos on YouTube claiming that Puerto Ricans built hip hop. And he's a big defender of Puerto Ricans' involvement in hip hop. And so he goes by the name of Urban Exegesis. I think it's Urban Exegesis with Dr. Derek Cologne. I believe that's his YouTube page, right? Okay, so I find his commentary very interesting, right? One of the things that caught my attention is that he said he admits that black people created hip hop, but Puerto Ricans helped to build it. Now, when I heard him say that, I said, well, doesn't that mean the same thing? Because if you think about create, that means something wasn't, together, organized. And, it was in the process of it being built. and Puerto Ricans somehow help complete the process. So if you look up the word create, the definition of it is to build. You look up the word build, the definition is to create. It's one and the same. To me, it's double speak. He's trying to have his cake and eat it too. I tried to call him on it. I watched a few of his videos. I posted my commentary trying to help him understand where he's wrong. Now, he made a big mistake, in my opinion, in my humble opinion. He made a video attacking Tariq Nasheed, and I'm not so worried about Tariq Nasheed getting on him because he would destroy this brother. But now he got the attention of Red Supreme TV. And I remember making a comment on his thread, and I said, listen, man, you keep doing this, you keep putting yourself out there, you're going to get embarrassed. You know what I'm saying? You're going to get embarrassed and humiliated in front of everybody. And if you got kids or grandkids and they see this, that's not going to look good for you. I want to help you before you put yourself out there and get exposed. So needless to say, I seen a couple of videos after that. He's still going strong. So I'm going to, I'm going to leave a link to this video for him, and I want him to look. Hopefully, he'll look at it before he goes on a big, stage platform and get embarrassed. So one of the things Red Supreme brought up, and I agree, I felt he was very disrespectful to Black culture, right? On one hand, he would say it wasn't Black culture that created hip hop, it was hood culture. And he's only saying hood culture because he, in the hood, since Puerto Ricans was in the hood, he can then claim some type of credit for the development of hip hop. So he takes it out of Black culture and make this term called hood culture. All the elements of hip hop comes from African American or foundational Black American culture. All of it. I think I said it earlier. All of it comes from that. Nothing comes from Puerto Ricans or what have you. So that's a false statement that he made. I tried to correct him on that, but again, he's not hearing it. So I don't know what else to say to him about that. But he has to understand this. It's only proximity to Black people that he got this, that Puerto Ricans got an opportunity to witness genius, the creative genius of Black folks. Because prior to the Civil Rights Movement, Black people were segregated. All the musical genres that we know today, from the blues to gospel to rock and roll, soul, funk, and all of that, for the most part, was created in segregated communities. Other people weren't around as much, right? But hip hop was created post-segregation. And so Puerto Ricans had a front row seat to the musical genius of Black people. And because Black people are so welcoming, we allowed them to come in and participate. But they turning that around and making it seem like it's something more than it really is. So I want to correct the record that, again, this is FBA culture, period. In a story. So one thing he's disrespectful that I found, it was funny, he was talking about hip hop fashion, and he says, well, Black people can't get credit for that because they didn't manufacture the clothing or the shoes or the sneakers, whatever. You have to give that credit to white people for that. So they shouldn't get credit for the fashion. Again, everything about hip hop, from the vernacular to the fashion to the music, is FBA. No question about it. So then he talks about another disrespectful thing. He tried to say, well, So Sonic Force, when they created, I believe the song was Planet Rock, he said they got their inspiration from a white group, Kraftwerk, who made Trans Europe Express. Now, I'm 62 years old, so I was around when that song came out. That was a nice song. Everybody was rocking to that song. And about 1975, that came out, right? And so, so I had to remind him that there was a song by BT Express called BT Express, which was somewhat of a similar song with a train rhythmic pattern to it. So I said, is it possible that Kraftwerk got their inspiration to create their song from this black group called BT Express? He never answered that question, because we all know that black people have influenced all musicians all around the world. So if they got any ideas that sound remotely like our music, it probably came from something that they heard. There's a brother or a white dude called Ron Templeton from Germany. He was part of Heatwave, a white dude. One of the greatest soul writers ever. You know, he made the song Always and Forever. And I think he wrote Rock With You for Michael Jackson. He was inspired from what he heard from America living in Germany. So our music is all over the place. We inspire musicians all over the world. And so this is what he has to understand. And I have a feeling he doesn't get it. You know, so like I said, let me move on. There's one thing I want to point out. Yeah, there's another thing that kills me about how he thinks. Let me see. And then I'm going to end this video real quick after I make this point. Just bear with me for one moment. Whoop, that went a little too far. All right, let's move it down here. Now, some of you are old enough to know who this is. This is Michael Douglas. He was in a movie called Wall Street. And you see the item in his hand is a mobile phone. And at the time when this movie came out, I mean, that was a status symbol to have a mobile phone, right? And no one would have an issue drawing a link from that phone to the smartphone. We could say that mobile phone evolved into what we have today. No one would argue with that, right? Let's take the Model T Ford car, one of the first car manufactured in the United States. No one would argue that car didn't evolve eventually to the cars that we have today. But for some reason, Brother Cologne can't see that the rapping that was done in the 30s and 40s and the dancing that was done in the 30s and 40s and the 60s has no connection to hip hop music, MCing and rapping or breakdancing. He totally disconnects that period and said there's no connection. Everything has a precursor. Everything evolves. That is an evolution from the 40s to hip hop culture today. He refuses to see that connection. It's common sense. This is another way he disrespects black culture. Call it nursery rhymes and things of that nature. The brother has, like I said, I don't want him to get embarrassed. I hope what I'm saying to him, I hope he gets a chance to listen to this video, and maybe there's something that can be said or he hears that might change his opinion. And so he doesn't get embarrassed. But with that said, listen, I don't do this often, and you probably could tell, guys, I don't do this often. But if you think that this information is valuable, please just hit the like button so more people could hear it. I think Black people have to be armed with certain information. If you have any questions regarding what I said, maybe I can expand on it in the comments. Feel free to comment. I'm all about helping our people get out of these psychological traps we find ourselves in. And one of those traps is allowing everybody into our culture who don't belong. You know, they don't get a black card to be able to call us nigger. And when Black people ask them to stop calling us nigger, that person won't change his mind. He's gonna stay steadfast calling us nigger. We can't allow people in our culture to disrespect us. And when we ask them to stop it, they should have enough respect to stop it. And we have to start acting like, we're protecting our people. Don't let people run over you. Don't let people take advantage of your culture. This is your culture, FBA. This belongs to you. Don't let nobody take it from you. You know what I'm saying? Don't let it happen. So if you find my information helpful and you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer any questions in the commentary. Like I said, again, hit the like button. I don't really care about subscribers. I got things to do. I'm a musician. I got things to do, But if I sense that enough people want to be or interested in hearing what I got to say, I got a lot I got to say or want to say. I'll be more than happy to start making some videos. But this ain't about me. This is about us. And with that, I'm out.